Welcome to the initial episode of the Rules Plus podcast. The purpose of this podcast is to expand access to group study of NCAA football rules for members of the Austin Football Officials Association. Our AFOA membership includes approximately 450 high school referees to serve prep programs at approximately 80 schools in the greater Central Texas area. Many of our members are also college officials serving Division I, FBS, and FCS institutions, as well as institutions in Divisions II and III. For many years, our members have participated in a voluntary study group that we call Rules Plus, which meets for 1 hour before our weekly AFOA Business and Education program during the fall. I'm entering my 46th season as a member of AFOA, where I have been privileged to lead our Rules Plus program for nearly a decade. This podcast will allow us to continue our deep dive into the rules year-round, including the 6 weeks of high school playoffs in Texas, the month of college bowl games, and the 18 spring practice days in Texas Conferences 5A and 6A, spread across 34 calendar days. I am Michael Barrett, a retired technical writer, editor, and university lecturer. I hold a PhD in rhetoric and writing assessment. I work the referee position in my 7-person crew. I've worked 2 Texas high school state championship games, one in the Astrodome way back in the day, and one more recently at the Dallas Cowboys AT&T Stadium. Officiating football has given me a lifetime of challenge, opportunity, and especially reward. Why will this podcast interest you? Well, are you a rising high school or college football referee? Or are you simply a passionate fan of football who just wants to better understand what's going on? If you're an official in Austin, Texas, you know that the AFOA officials who regularly participate in our Rules Plus study group are fascinated by the intricacies of football rules, and they are ambitious about advancing their officiating career. We are, in fact, football nerds. Rules Plus is for the guys and gals who think up the endless what-ifs that just might possibly, maybe, sometimes come up once in a blue moon. Rules Plus attracts the deep thinkers who might, honestly, become annoying during our regular meeting with interruptions asking clarifications of sticky rules questions. Rules Plus also attracts our junior members with relatively brief experience because our study group provides a safe place for them to ask those questions and seek those clarifications that more senior members, who've often forgotten what it's like to be new at something, may regard as obvious or silly. If you're a passionate fan, this podcast offers you a way to eavesdrop on officials to better understand how we see a game and how we work to apply very complicated rules amid the seeming chaos of real-time play action. If you think you'd like to see how the sausage is made, keep listening. So, if you're still with me, let's talk a little bit about conventions when we talk about football. While the primary audience for this podcast is active football officials, I hope that these episodes will attract a growing secondary audience of listeners who simply find the content interesting. So let me cover a few conventions that casual listeners might otherwise find confusing. I'll try throughout the subsequent episodes of this podcast to strike a balance between explaining what most listeners may regard as obvious or redundant versus assuming what needs no explanation. First, the convention when describing plays is to refer to the team that starts out with the ball as Team A. Just remember that Team A is the team that makes the ball become live, which means it either hikes the ball or does the kickoff. The other team is, as you might expect, Team B. The teams retain that designation throughout a play, until the ball becomes dead, even when possession changes during a play because of a fumble or interception. Second, the NCAA rules book comprises two principal sections. The first section presents the official rules. The second section presents play situations with associated approved rulings that illustrate how rules should be interpreted. So, in discussing play scenarios, officials may refer to the actual rule from the first section or to the approved ruling from the second section, or both. Third, the NCAA rules book also includes a preface that presents a list of the actual text of rules changes, an index of editorial changes, and a statement of points of emphasis. The editorial changes are meant to clean up or clarify language, and the points of emphasis are meant to give officials feedback on the philosophy and intent of the rules as a guide for how officials should be applying the rules. The preface serves to recognize that there are three considerations that should underlie any judgment officials exercise. Did an action have an effect on player safety, on competitive balance, or on sportsmanship? Fourth, the NCAA rules book devotes an entire rule to definitions of specialized terms. In discussing play scenarios, officials must use specialized vocabulary rather than generic language a fan or game announcer might use, as I will do in this podcast. I can give three examples to make the point. One, the term lateral does not appear in the rules book. For officials, a pass is either backward or forward. Two, a fumble is recovered if the ball has hit the ground, or it is intercepted if the ball has not hit the ground. Three, a pass may be possessed if a player controls the ball while he is off the ground, but it may only be caught if he has returned to the ground in possession of the ball. As with lawyers, bureaucrats, and small children, precise language is critical for officiating. Okay, so finally, let's get with the actual 2023 rules changes. But first, a little bit more background. While the consensus among coaches and officials is that the rules changes for 2023 are relatively minor, keep in mind that minor rules changes are like minor surgery. They may only be minor if they're not about you. The NCAA rules book always includes in its preface a page labeled Major Rules Changes, so no official should be complacent about noting the annual changes and thoroughly understanding their implications for us in administering them. In fact, for several years now, the NCAA Football Rules Committee, that's its official name, by the way, has adopted a protocol to follow a 2-year cycle of alternating on years and off years for introducing changes. Major changes are allowed in even numbered years, yet the Rules Committee may make changes in odd numbered years for three reasons: to address player safety, to adjust rules from the previous season that have not achieved their purpose, or to adopt measures that would help improve the image of the game. So while 2023 is an off year, so called, in the playing rules cycle, there are nevertheless changes first announced in April, primarily tweaks to timing rules, meant to be the first halting steps toward reducing the length of games and the number of plays, ostensibly in the interest of player safety. So as of mid-June, here are the 5 changes for 2023. Extension of periods, now only for the second and fourth periods. Game clock after first downs, no longer stopped. Consecutive timeouts, not allowed by the same team in a single dead ball interval. Instant replay, may be used in games without a replay official. And second level defenders on place kick plays, a 1-second restriction on making contact. Compare these changes with the 8 changes for the 2022 season. At that time, There was a protocol established for investigating allegations of feigning injuries. The ball became dead immediately when a ball carrier faked a feet first slide. The penalty was toughened for an illegal block by a signaler for a fair catch. The penalty was toughened for illegally touching legal forward pass. There was an appeal option added for a targeting foul. There were further restrictions on blocking below the waist. There were penalty options added for fouls by the defense during a pass play, and the penalty was toughened for defensive holding. You can judge for yourself whether the 2022 changes were major and the 2023 changes are minor. The 2023 provision for using instant replay doesn't apply to Texas high school football. So let's now look at the other 4 changes in detail. Perhaps the most impactful timing change is the first change modifying the rule for the extension of periods. That is, a modification in the procedure when a period ends during a play in which there is a foul or inadvertent whistle, covered in Rule 3-2-3-A. Previously, if a penalty were accepted for a live ball foul or there were offsetting fouls during a down in which time expires in any period, the period was extended for one untimed down. The change is that now only the second and fourth periods will be extended in such a situation. I can speak from experience that when such a situation occurs, many fans and even some coaches who aren't aware of the rule heap abuse on officials as we mark off the penalty and set up for one more play, apparently, in their view, oblivious to the clock having hit 0. I've had public address announcers mock us for not noticing that the clock had run out, and I've had game clock operators prematurely set the clock to 12 minutes and create further uproar among the fans. Sometimes the requirement to extend the period has important consequences, such as on a windy night when the offended team has to wait one more play to get the wind advantage. If, for example, that one more play is likely to be a repeat of a fourth down punt, the offended team has certainly been put at a disadvantage. That's why there's an exception in the rule, introduced by an editorial change in 2021, that allows the offended team to accept the penalty and then to exercise an option to not extend the period if the foul was by the team in possession and the penalty includes a loss of down. But here's the problem. For very few fouls by Team A, does the penalty include a loss of down? Among the most likely such fouls would be illegally kicking or batting the ball, illegally passing or handing the ball, or intentionally throwing a backward pass out of bounds to save time. For a garden variety foul, such as illegal formation, illegal motion, holding, or perhaps blocking below the waist, if Team B accepts the penalty and chooses an enforcement spot that would likely mean that Team A would repeat the punt down, the period would be extended, maintaining Team A's wind advantage. So the exception would not seem to do much for Team B. Well, hold that thought. Let's discuss further 2 scenarios for the fourth down punt play occurring during a down in which time expires. Suppose Team A punts from an illegal formation with a fifth player inadvertently lined up in the backfield. In scenario 1, the punt is shanked or Team B gets a great return, giving Team B the ball at its own 46-yard line in excellent position to start a drive. In scenario 2, the punt goes out of bounds at Team B's 2-yard line, leaving Team B in terrible position to start a drive. Let's look at scenario 1. Team B, of course, has the ball in great position, and the foul by Team A carries a penalty of only 5 yards. So Team B's choice is obvious, right? Decline the penalty and move to the next period. In his excitement, the Team B coach may blurt out exactly that choice. We decline. We decline. Well, here's where a crew should be exercising excellent game management, beginning with the wing official on Team B's sideline closest to the head coach. That official will immediately remind the coach that there is another option for him to consider. He may accept the 5 yard penalty and choose to have it tacked on to the spot where Team B has the ball at the end of the punt run back. The official will also remind him, however, that if he accepts the penalty, the period must be extended for one untimed down, namely the first down play snapping from Team A's 49-yard line. Team B will still be moving against the wind, but just for that one play, on first down at that. Of course, the all knowing referee and crew chief knows this rule, but it's not necessary to wait for the R to explain the options in this scenario to the coach. The wing officials can make the crew look very good by being on top of the situation and immediately, proactively communicating critical, accurate, and thorough information to the coach who's on their sideline. Now, let's look at the more problematic scenario 2. Team B has the ball in terrible position, so it's clear that it will choose to accept the 5 yard penalty. The question is which enforcement spot the Team B coach should choose. If the coach chooses enforcement from the previous spot, Team A will punt again after being pushed back 5 yards, and the period will be extended. Team A will still be punting with the wind at its back, but it's quite likely that the outcome won't be any worse for Team B than having the ball at its 2 yard line. If the coach chooses enforcement from the succeeding spot, Team B will have the ball with 5 yards added to where the punt went out of bounds, and the period will be extended. Team B will still be moving against the wind, but with a first down play snapping from Team B's 7 yard line. The 7 yard line is still a very bad position, however, so the Team B coach may well decide he'd rather take his chances with a redo of Team A's punt, even with the wind in Team A's favor. So, to recap, under scenario 1, the better choice for Team B is probably to accept the penalty with enforcement at the succeeding spot. Under scenario 2, the better choice is probably to accept the penalty with enforcement from the previous spot. And consider one more variable for these scenarios. If the infraction by Team A were a 10-yard holding foul or a 15-yard block below the waist foul, Team B's best options might be less obvious. But now in 2023, this so-called minor rule change means that if these scenarios happen at the end of the first period and a penalty is enforced, the teams will change directions, and the subsequent replay of Team A's punt or the snap for Team B's first down play will begin with the wind now in the sails of Team B. I'm guessing the Team B coach will find it easy to choose to have Team A punt again against the wind. So why would the Rules Committee choose not to change the fouled at the end of the period procedure for the end of the second and fourth periods as well? The answer should be obvious. Without an extension of the first or second halves, the offended team would not have an opportunity to take advantage of the penalty. Whew, that's a lot to digest. I suggest you take a moment to stand up, stretch a bit, get a snack, unless, of course, you're driving. There's still a little more to cover here. For Rules Plus study sessions, you may be finding out there always seems to be a little more to be said. That's why we meet before our regular AFOA meetings. I have addressed the situation where a penalty is accepted for a live ball foul during a down in which time expires. I haven't addressed the situation when there are offsetting fouls. So here goes. Keep in mind that offsetting fouls means that live ball fouls have been committed by both teams. When that happens, we essentially have a do-over, which means that the period must be extended, at least in the case of the second and fourth periods, under this 2023 rule change. Simple enough. No options are needed from either coach, right? Well, not quite. If there is a change of possession during a down in which time expires, a complication is introduced by exceptions 1 and 2 in Rule 10 1 4 concerning handling offsetting fouls. If Team B had not fouled before gaining possession, Team B may choose to refuse offsetting fouls and keep possession of the ball after completion of the penalty for its foul. Team A has no say in the matter, although Team A could choose to decline the penalty for Team B's foul, which is clearly quite unlikely. Officials informally refer to this principle as the clean hands rule. If you get a kickoff, punt, or turnover and your hands are clean before that happens, you can keep the ball by choosing to ignore Team A's foul. But of course, there's one complication here, too. In the case of a punt, the post-scrimmage kick rule provides that a foul by Team B during the kick, that is, from the time foot meets ball until the ball is caught, recovered, or becomes dead, is treated as if the foul occurred while Team B was in possession of the ball, even though technically it wasn't. So, exception 2 in Rule 10 1 4 makes it clear that Team B's hands are clean even if it fouls during the kick portion of the down. Let me quote it for you. Quote, when all Team B fouls that occur before possession changes are governed by post-scrimmage kick rules, Team B may refuse offsetting fouls and accept enforcement from where the kick ends. End quote. The bottom line is that when there are offsetting fouls, the period is going to be extended for an untimed down, either because there's going to be a do-over or because Team B will run its first down play. Just for fun, before I close discussion of the extend the period rule, I want to share with you a wacky play situation in the best tradition of the rules plus penchant for dissecting can't ever happen, what if situations. I'm parroting this play from a terrific study resource, the Reading Study Guide to NCAA Football Rules by George Demetrio, which I'll give more information about at the close of this podcast. Team A, leading 27-24, has 4th down and 5 to go at its own 20-yard line with 4 seconds remaining in the fourth period. Punter A22 can't handle the snap, leaving the ball rolling loose on the ground at the 6-yard line. In his panic, he kicks the loose ball backward into and through the end zone. Time expires during the play. I'll stay silent for a moment as you consider what the outcome of this play will be. If I were more skilled at this technically, this is only my first podcast, of course, I'd play the Jeopardy theme, but you get the point. I'll give it another few moments here. Okay, did you figure it out? Was 30 seconds not enough time to figure this out? When we're on the field, we don't have much more time than that to figure out what to do before coaches and fans get very antsy. Well, okay, here goes. This is what happens. The outcome of the play is a safety, which means Team B would lose 27-26. If Team B were to accept the penalty for illegally kicking the ball, enforcement would be from the spot of the foul, the 6-yard line, half the distance to the goal. The penalty also includes a loss of down, so Team B would clearly choose to have the period extended so they can run one play with first and goal from the 3-yard line. I should add that if there were a penalty accepted for a live ball foul during Team B's first down play, the period would be extended further. The teams would play until there was a down free of an accepted penalty for a live ball foul. Far-fetched, you say? Hardly. Rare, yes, but I've penalized illegally kicking the ball on one occasion during each of the last 2 seasons. Perhaps by now you're thinking that for a seemingly minor rule change, I've sure had a lot to say. You'd be correct about that. I hope this lengthy discussion illustrates why officials can't afford to be complacent about or dismissive of thinking in depth about the implications of deceptively straightforward tweaks of rules during these so called off years in the NCAA rules change cycle. I suggest that this lengthy discussion also illustrates why officials can be vulnerable to careless mistakes at the end of any of the 4 periods, but especially now at the end of the second and fourth periods with this rule change in effect. It's tempting, as the end of a half is imminent, for officials, as well that matter for players and coaches, to relax prematurely, anticipating the welcome break from weather, stress, fatigue, and concentration after working hard for 24 playing minutes. We have to summon the mental toughness to maintain our attentiveness to the end. Okay, now on to the second rule change, eliminating stopping the clock after a first down. While the ruling authority for Texas Prep Athletics, the University Interscholastic League, has decided that this change will not be adopted in Texas high school football, it's worth briefly discussing the rationale for this change, since it will be happening in college games. Let me first dismiss the myth that the purpose for stopping the clock after a first down is to allow the chain crew time to move and reset the stakes. That may have been the reason in 1968 when the rule was adopted, but that purpose is as outdated now as the wishbone formation. For the plodding, run dominated game of the 1960s, crews administered games with a slow, deliberate pace. After a first down, the referee waited for the chain crew to be set and for all of his crew members to be in their position before he indicated with a signal and his whistle that the ball was ready for play. Only then did the 25-second play clock begin running. In response to today's fast-paced, high-scoring, wide-open style in college football, the 40-second play clock begins running as soon as the ball becomes dead, and the 7 or 8 person crew gets the ball set as quickly as possible. So when there's a first down and the game clock is stopped, the referee will typically start the game clock very quickly, as soon as, and often even before, the umpire or center judge places the ball. The chain crew may or may not be fully set at that time. So, in fact, the game clock actually stops for perhaps 5 to 8 seconds rather than the 15 to 20 seconds it was stopped in the era before the emergence of basketball on grass. So it doesn't seem that the change to keep the clock running after first down, except in the last 2 minutes of each half, will make a big difference. But there is talk among coaches and commentators that the change may be merely the first of several initiatives to shorten games, reduce game times, and thereby protect players. For example, Georgia coach Kirby Smart has said that the change shouldn't significantly impact games this season, but he called the change a good first step to protecting players by reducing the number of plays. Indeed, Even if the change results in only 7 or 8 fewer plays over the course of a 12-game regular season, that's approximately 100 fewer plays. It strikes me that in taking this baby step, the NCAA is following the playbook of Major League Baseball, when MLB, for example, eliminated throwing 4 pitches for an intentional walk a few years ago, setting the precedent for making today's major paradigm shift with multiple radical rules changes in the pitch clock, larger bases, and limited pitcher disengagements. It wouldn't surprise me if this rule becomes to be accepted in Texas within a season or so, if the impact on college football is regarded as positive. The third rule change, eliminating consecutive timeouts. It's not clear to me whether the purpose of this change is to address the length of games or to eliminate a tactic for freezing a kicker that perhaps is felt by the Rules Committee to be unseemly, unsportsmanlike, or simply have, quote, a significant impact on the image of the game, end quote, or both. Typically, after the NCAA announces rules changes in the spring, clarification follows in workshops and clinics conducted during the summer. We may know much more about the rationale and justification for this change by the start of the 2023 season. Fourth rule change, at the snap restrictions on second-level defenders on place kick plays. Here is an off-year rule change that is quite clearly motivated by improving player safety, defenders as well as the offensive linemen being contacted. The rule applies to defenders who are in an upright position more than 1 yard from their line of scrimmage and or moving forward at the snap. Such a defender may not contact an offensive lineman within 1 second after the snap. A rule change several years ago protected the snapper from contact by any defender within 1 second of the snap, and a more recent change prohibits any defender from even lining up over the snapper. There are also long-standing prohibitions against leaping over and triple teaming blockers. Because the clear evolution of the rules for place kicks has been toward reducing significant dangers for both defense and offense, it would be easy, but careless, to assume that all rule infractions regarding player safety during place kicks are personal fouls, but that is not true. Rules regarding actual illegal contact are listed in Section 1 of Rule 9, which comprises the catalog of personal fouls. Rules regarding where players may stand or align themselves are listed in Section 3 of Rule 6, which comprises information about scrimmage kicks. The penalty for any personal foul is 15 yards. The penalty for violations of scrimmage kick protocol is 5 yards. That means, for example, that the penalty for lining up over the snapper is 5 yards, but the penalty for contacting the snapper within 1 second of the snap is 15 yards. This distinction is not important only because of the difference in yardage assessments. A 5-yard penalty for a procedural foul merely allows the down to be repeated. A 15-yard penalty for a personal foul does more. It also provides for an automatic first down, and if it occurs during a down that ends in a touchdown, the penalty may be enforced on the try, the kickoff, or from the succeeding spot in an overtime period. A mistake in characterizing the nature of a foul related to a place kick could have significant impact, for good or ill, on both teams. So now some closing thoughts. That's certainly enough discussion for one podcast. I do hope you've been enlightened and energized for the coming season, and even entertained. If you're inclined to read further on the 2023 rules changes, or follow up on tangential topics such as handling offsetting fouls, post-scrimmage kick rules, or restrictions on defenders during place kicks, consider supplementing your professional library with titles I highly recommend. 1. You might check out the website for Referee Magazine at https://www.referee.com/, which covers multiple sports with articles about rules and features about officials around the country. The subscription rates currently showing on their website are $49.95 for 12 issues and $84.95 for 24 issues. Second, perhaps the indispensable resource for many years now for football-specific rules study is the Reading Study Guide to NCAA Football Rules, now published by George Demetrio. Dr. Reading, who holds a PhD in physical chemistry from Vanderbilt University, began publishing his annual study guide in 1991. And for many years, he served as an instructor at officiating camps sponsored by the Texas Association of Sports Officials, the umbrella organization for the Austin Football Officials Association. Dr. Redding started his career working high school football in Texas. He later officiated in the Southwest Conference from 1988 to 1993 and served as a referee in the Southeastern Conference for nearly a decade. His postseason assignments include the 1999 SEC Championship, that was Florida, Alabama, and 3 national championship games at the 1991 Orange Bowl, Colorado and Notre Dame, the 1993 Sugar Bowl, Alabama and Miami, and the 1998 Rose Bowl, Michigan and Washington State. After retiring from officiating on field in 2004, Dr. Redding served as a technical advisor and instant replay official for the SEC before becoming the conference's coordinator of officials. Dr. Redding also served as the NCAA secretary and rules editor from 2008 to 2017. The Reading Study Guide is available from Amazon, from the several officials equipment vendors, and from Double S distributors at Box 2537, Denton, Texas 76202, to name a few. Be sure you obtain the study guide for NCAA rules if you live in Texas. Otherwise, if your interest is high school football elsewhere, there is a version that addresses NFHS football rules. Of course, to go directly to the source, members of TASO, that is the Texas Association of Sports Officials, should receive the official NCAA rules book later in the summer. If you're not a TASO member, that rules book is available at https://www.ncaapublications.com and perhaps from other sources as well. Also, for members of TASO, TASO has a new partner for getting access to the college football officiating organization. TASO has now partnered with RefQuest. It is the new NCAA officiating service provider. TASO football members can receive a deeply discounted registration of $40 for the 2023 season. Access to the CFO Central Hub includes searchable rules book and casebook, video content, tests and quizzes, and various updates throughout the season. It is a terrific bargain for some excellent resources for rules and mechanics study. And if you're a TASO member, you perhaps have already heard the announcement from Michael Fitch that the keynote speaker at the annual meeting of TASO football in late July in Dallas will be Steve Shaw, the college football officiating national coordinator and editor of the NCAA football rule book. Yet another indication of why it's such a good deal to be a member of TASO. If you're not an AFOA member, I hope you'll consider joining us or your local football officials association in your state. Training has already begun for our new AFOA members. It's not too late to contact us. Email us at recruiting@afoa.ws or visit our website at www.austinfootballofficials.org or call us at 512-298-2987. And I hope you'll come back and visit this podcast regularly. I'd love to hear what you think about the podcast and what football rules topics you're interested in. The clock is ticking to kick off in 2023. Till next time, have a great week.